Most advice on self-improvement emphasizes accumulation. We are told to wake up earlier, stack new habits, and set more ambitious goals. But for a mind already at its limit, this relentless push toward more often leads directly to burnout. Piling new demands onto an overloaded brain creates internal friction. The energy required to maintain these new routines competes with your existing responsibilities, leaving you exhausted by the mere effort of holding it all together. Psychology defines this limit as cognitive bandwidth. It is the finite capacity your brain has to process information, make decisions, and regulate emotions at any given moment. Several ingrained habits quietly drain this bandwidth from the background. Over time, these energy leaks rewire your brain chemistry, eventually shaping your temperament and how you respond to the world. Self-mastery begins with an audit of the mind, ruthlessly subtracting the behaviors that are silently hijacking your focus. The first phase of this audit targets social leakage, the invisible, exhaustive effort spent attempting to manage how other people perceive you. This often stems from social validation dependency, where you feel an intense need for others to understand your perspective. This leaves the brain in a state of constant emotional negotiation, where your sense of peace is tethered to someone else's approval. This illustrates the over-explanation loop. Justifying choices makes your brain interpret misunderstanding as a threat, triggering a cortisol pulse. When you stop over-explaining, you sever the signal. Cortisol stops, and energy redirects inward for your own cognitive needs. A similar drain occurs through conversational narcissism, the habit of performing in social settings to avoid being seen as boring. Instead of listening, you spend your bandwidth calculating your next impressive response. Stepping back from this performance allows you to bypass the process of impression management. Psychologically, silence often commands more respect than oversharing. By saying less, you stop leaking emotional energy and allow your presence to carry its own weight. You gain a sense of power the moment you accept that your peace is independent of whether or not people truly get you. The second phase of the audit targets your physical environment, focusing on the primary drain on modern attention: uncontrolled digital input. The human reward system is not designed for the mechanics of infinite scrolling. These platforms bombard the brain with rapid-fire, low-effort stimuli, providing cheap hits of satisfaction that require no actual engagement or effort. This graph tracks dopamine sensitivity. As digital stimulation spikes multiply, your brain's sensitivity drops well below the baseline of a normal life, making everyday reality unrewarding. A new threshold forms. You lose patience, craving chaos just to feel a baseline level of engagement. Reclaiming this focus requires a quiet digital detox. You can unfollow, mute, and unsubscribe without making an announcement. This treats your attention as a scarce and valuable resource that must be defended. Protecting your focus is a necessary defense against the artificial hijacking of your neurochemistry. The final phase of the audit looks at internal leakage, the moments where the mind burns its own resources, fighting against the past or the self. This often takes the form of cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort we feel when things lack closure. It drives the exhausting need to understand why people left or why moments ended without a clear sense of justice. Many people also use harsh self-criticism as a motivational tool, believing that internal cruelty is the only way to ensure growth and avoid failure. Data from Stanford University shows this approach is counterproductive. As the level of self-criticism rises, cortisol spikes, which physically impairs the brain's ability to learn from its mistakes. You cannot grow effectively while your brain is in a state of self-induced stress. This urge to prove your worth often traces back to conditional acceptance. If early life rewards were tied strictly to results rather than simple existence, the mind builds a framework where rest is a luxury that must be purchased through constant performance. Shifting the internal dialogue from "I am not enough" to "I am learning" changes how the brain processes setbacks. It moves the subconscious away from a threat response and toward a state that allows for actual error correction. Allocating your mental bandwidth to fund a war against your own identity leaves no resources for internal peace. Initially, removing these habits causes psychological resistance. The mind feels emptiness, mistaking familiar chaos for safety. But as you persist, the turbulence slows and settles. A natural rebalancing occurs. As the artificial noise fades, cognitive space opens up. The brain stops relying on frantic activity and high-stimulus input to feel secure. You will notice a shift in how your mind operates. The reward system begins to favor clarity over activity, making it easier to maintain focus without constant effort. This audit leads to a state of quiet control. Decisions become cleaner. Solitude becomes a source of energy rather than a punishment. You begin to process reality as it is, rather than just reacting to it. By subtracting what was hijacking your focus, your mind is finally yours. Which of these 9 habits is still secretly controlling you today?